People who were considered gifted early on and subsequently fell off, what are your stories? Grew up being told I was smart but lazy. I went to gifted schools. I barely scraped by, because I could not concentrate on anything. I barely studied, and got just enough credits to graduate high school. I never learned to work hard till I started college. Even then, my first attempt failed and I dropped out after 1.5 semesters. I went back a few years later and made straight A's for the first time in my life. Also, mental health was a big challenge for me, and still is. At least now, there are resources available that just weren't there when I was growing up in the 80s. First and foremost, no one 20-30 years ago saw speed reading as a problem. Now that it's ingrained in me, we know it is. Second, I got misdiagnosed at 8 with behavior disorders non-specified, now lumped as autism spectrum, then somewhere it became bipolar as the quack who was treating me was getting compensated massively for prescribing those drugs. I have ADHD, which in females has some symptom overlap, emotional dysregulation, but not many drugs or treatments overlap. The joke is I out-earned my sisters with master's degrees just as a fast food manager. So it worked out. It was the pressure from family and teachers. You're going to be a doctor one day. That turned into only an A? Not an A? So I tanked my grades on purpose in high school, but the pressure got worse. Wasted potential and disappointed were thrown around a lot. I finished high school with honors, got my B.Sc. I took the MCAT and got accepted to med school. Then I decided I was unhappy. I was tired of living someone else's dream and I just quit it all. Ironically, I now work in entertainment and get judged by strangers constantly, but at least I'm living my dream. I believe the word I've heard used for people like me is twice exceptional. I was in gifted classes, but I also had pretty significant ADHD, currently diagnosed and medicated, but undiagnosed and unmedicated at the time. I could cram last minute for any test or crank out a paper in a night or two, but I never learned how to self-regulate or work steadily toward a goal. I made it to grad school, and that's when shit really got hard. I did great in the classes, but my thesis project was a nightmare, and I think I only graduated because my advisor wanted to be rid of me. I got stuck in gifted classes because a teacher cried that I was completing her lessons too fast. Learned how to type and make PowerPoint presentations, never learned anything advanced or how to actually study. Eventually, I would fail nearly anything I actually studied for, so I gave up trying to study at all. Then my mom decided I should have been smart enough to get into college free and she wouldn't help me get a loan. She tried to bully me into joining the military, too. I regret not going to college, but I guess I should be happy I don't have student loans. I was never exceptionally gifted, and once I realized I'd have to put in actual work to achieve that level, I couldn't be bothered because I was used to not having to put work into anything. Developing anxiety as a teenager didn't help either. I'm in my 30s now and I still have zero motivation to put effort into things that I'm not good at right away. I'm happy and I like my life, but it's weird sometimes thinking about where I might be if I had applied myself better or been raised to value intrinsic motivation instead of just being told I was lucky to be smart. Turns out I wasn't gifted, I just have Asperger's and ADHD. I pick stuff up really easily, but I also lose interest quickly, so I rarely develop a deeper understanding of a subject. And it turns out most of us gifted kids were actually neurodivergent. I do wonder how different my life would be if I had been diagnosed as a kid and given help instead of living with huge expectations put on me that I have no hope of living up to. Like a bunch of other people answering here, I also have a severe anxiety disorder now, along with other mental health problems. When I was young I had a good general intelligence and never had to study much. I just coasted and got good grades. But as the learning curve steepened I did not adapt. I was incredibly undisciplined. It also didn't help that my grandparents guilted me into studying something practical after telling me that studying English language, English literature and history would be a massive waste of time. Couple this with a bit of a breakdown caused by my parents' alcoholism and I ended up dropping out of university engineering course in my second year. Apparently I was screened for autism age 5 because I was weird. The guy said negative, the kid is actually highly gifted. At age 6 my parents tried to move me up a grade because I was way ahead of everyone else, but school said no, he needs more social development. The next year the teacher abused the fucking shit out of me and I gave up on education forever. I'm talking like, he never ever let me go for recess. He had my desk face a back wall for months. My education fell off a cliff forever after that. I'm a great electrician though. Schools refusing to keep up with the accelerated programs I could do because they would lose large amounts of funding. I could have been a kid to graduate at 14 because school never challenged me. I could have been someone with a bachelor's at 18 and had a world open for me. But the schools didn't want to lose $75,000 a year in funding they get per student. And my parents didn't fight for it. So I ended up not being pushed. I found my wife, started a family, and am existing. Would I trade it for the life I could have had? Never. My brother was a really talented goalkeeper here in Southern California in the 90s as a kid. I remember he appeared in a couple of newspapers and reporters asking if he is a future Mexico-USA goalkeeper. My mom kept a scrapbook of all his newspaper appearances. He was so talented that scouts asked about me and I hated playing soccer LMAO. Anyways, he did play college soccer, but drugs ultimately ruined him. He is in a much better place now that he is in his 40s. But man, those days in the 90s were fun cheering for him. School was super easy for me up until the day it wasn't, and then I was screwed. I never developed good study habits or a work ethic. So while I coasted through high school, I really struggled in university. I did graduate but barely, and I had to repeat several classes. And now I'm nervous because I'm seeing the same in my 11-year-old, who aces every test but has trouble with motivation to do homework, and whose attitude and initiative at school has been highlighted by her teachers as something to work on. Got really into smoking weed BC. That was the only way I could deal with general public stupidity. I did the bare minimum to get my A's in extracurriculars and whatnot. I did fine in school all the way to getting accepted to dental school, but I just couldn't bear being in school for another second, so I dropped out of college in my last semester of college and got a job in a restaurant. I fell in love with cooking in the kitchen. Now I own my own food truck and soon to open my brick and mortar. Not me, but a girl I grew up with was super gifted in all honors classes, that etc. all through school. She wound up going into early childhood ages like 5-10 teaching, stayed for a couple years then quit, and now works a mediocre job for some random company doing customer service. Her spouse still teaches. She said the pay is better, though that's not a tall order when comparing most salaries to a teaching salary, but she sold herself short and could have been far, far more successful. I settle for a job I'm really good at but dislike quite a bit. No degree, but I've worked my way pretty far up the corporate ladder just by being talented. I am successful and financially stable with a fantastic family, but I drink too much, probably because I sold my soul to my company doing a job that doesn't fulfill me. I'm not truly happy, but I'm not miserable either. I just kind of float through life on my intelligence. I suffered a few traumas and lacked support following them. So I just floundered with everyone being mad at me that I wasn't behaving normally. Now with more grief and trauma education happening in general, people have apologized to me, but it doesn't really make up for it. I still did accomplish more than expected despite those experiences though, but it could have been easier, better with any support from family etc. Had my whole life in education planned and had my college half done in high school, graduated, dropped out of college on a random Tuesday at work because I'd had a life crisis and been stuck living an endless cycle of work and sleep, having absolutely no motivation to do anything worth anything anymore. Went from being the kid the teachers used as an example of what to be to being the example of what to avoid in life. Parents got divorced when I was about 5 and mom married a way older guy. She stopped caring about me and pretty much didn't raise me after that. I had to start stealing to get new clothes because mine were way too small or so old they fell apart. School supplies too. Got into drugs and alcohol from ages 13-18. Then I grew up and realized if I don't change, it's my fault at this point. 25 now and life is great. I don't even know how gifted I was, but basically I just wanted to be a kid. And I was spoiled. We were poor, but the little bit that we did have was always funneled to me. It's like when a parent wants to give their child what they didn't have, but might not realize they are creating a bit of a monster in the process. In the grand scheme of things, I was probably a brighter version of Bobby Hill. Gifted in mathematics and logical thinking, produced shit graded in school and never really tried anyways. Did an apprenticeship, became a mechanic and discovered a passion for engineering. Now I am studying mechanical engineering. Am certainly gifted in some way compared to the average person, but my self-discipline is abysmal and I'm struggling a lot due to it. I lost the will to care. Decided to focus on my happiness instead of setting lofty goals that are largely out of my control. I have an okay job and a pretty good life devoid of money. When I look at my peers, they're largely not doing any better than me unless they fell into a trade they enjoy. Work is a crock of shit and I'm not gonna waste my life worrying about it. I was gifted or whatever, but I put in a good deal of effort once and natural knacks started to fall short. Once in college, I found myself working pretty hard to keep up. It was exhausting in every way, So one day, I had enough. I stopped trying as hard and focused on what I was good at instead. I've lost my ambition, but I am much happier for it. Realized that everything I was good at I was just hyperfixating over, and as soon as it all became uninteresting my motivation fell off a cliff. Now I'm basically stuck in a limbo of people thinking I'm not ambitious, but really I just don't have a clue what I want to do with my life, and I know it's not what I was convinced that it was. Wasn't gifted and talented until they kicked me out for not doing assignments. We had a school letter and I was in charge of the crossword puzzle. Apparently I made it too difficult. I noped out hard. My parents were also going through a nasty divorce at the time, so I started to rebel against anything structured and authority figures. It made me complacent in high school and I never studied outside school and got A's and B's with little effort. Arrived to college and suddenly I realized I needed to review material outside of class a lot more often and had zero good study habits. It took me a couple months to get good habits, but the first year of college was rough. When you are the gifted player in grade school you are miles ahead of others. You become the gifted in high school, you're yards ahead of others, and in college you're among all the other gifted, where now it's feet and then pros, where it is inches Olympics. It takes 0.01 second to break a record. You can be 1 second slower and now suck. When you are the gifted player in grade school you are miles ahead of others. You become the gifted in high school, you're yards ahead of others, and in college you're among all the other gifted, where now it's feet and then pros, where it is inches Olympics. It takes 0.01 second to break a record. You can be 1 second slower and now suck.